Have you ever noticed something strange? The most dangerous people rarely threaten you. They rarely shout. They rarely reveal their intentions. Instead, they smile. They agree. They nod their heads. And while everyone is busy looking for enemies, they quietly rearrange the board. By the time people realize what happened, the game is already over. History is full of these people, men who never appeared powerful until power belonged entirely to them. Octavian destroyed rivals without looking like a conqueror. Bismarck united an empire while convincing everyone he was simply managing politics. Even Machiavelli himself warned about a brutal truth. The lion gets attention. The fox survives. Most people think manipulation should be confronted immediately. Expose it. Fight it. Call it out. But what if that instinct is exactly why manipulators keep winning? What if every warning you give, every emotional confrontation, every attempt to reveal their intentions actually helps them? Because the manipulator already expects resistance. What they don't expect is someone who understands the game better than they do. Someone who never warns, ever reacts, ever reveals. Someone who simply outplays. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. These are Machiavelli's 7 rules for crushing manipulators without becoming their victim. Because sometimes the strongest move is the move nobody sees. Reversal 1. Never let them know what you know. Rule number 1. This is the rule that will require you to develop something that does not come naturally to most honest people. Discipline of strategic ignorance. In 1513, Machiavelli wrote from exile, stripped of power, tortured, humiliated by the Medici, and in his letters, in his private writings, there is something remarkable. He never told his enemies what he knew about them, not once, even when he could have, even when it would have felt satisfying, because he understood a principle that modern psychology has since confirmed in what researchers call strategic information asymmetry. A side that knows more, but appears to know less, holds every advantage. Think about it from the manipulator's perspective. If they suspect you've caught on, they change their behavior. They cover their tracks. They become careful. Now you're hunting a ghost. But if they believe you are still oblivious, they keep moving. They keep revealing. They keep making mistakes. And you keep watching. Robert Cialdini, in his research on influence and deception detection, found something that seems counterintuitive at first. People who immediately confronted suspected deceivers were actually less likely to uncover the full extent of the deception than those who waited, observed, and allowed the deception to unfold further. Why? Because premature confrontation collapses the behavior. You only see the surface layer of what someone is doing when you force them to stop. But if you wait, if you play dumb, stay warm, keep smiling, you see everything. Full architecture of the manipulation, the other people involved, the end game, all of it. There's a famous account of Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor who unified Germany not through idealism but through strategic coldness, who once discovered that a close political ally was feeding information to his enemies. He did not confront him. He did not remove him. He fed him false information, carefully crafted, specific enough to be believable. Then he watched where it went. Within 3 months, he had identified not 1 but 4 additional sources of leakage in his Kumpel, all from that single act of controlled silence. Confrontation would have closed 1 door. Silence opened 4. So here is your first rule. When you discover you are being manipulated, your face must not change. Your warmth must not change. Your access must not change. Let them believe they are winning, because a manipulator who believes they are winning is a manipulator who is still playing. And a not manipulator who is still playing is a manipulator you can study, predict, and ultimately undo. Reversal 2. Control what they want, not what they do. Rule number 2. This one is older than Machiavelli. It was practiced by Sun Tzu, by Augustus Caesar, by every truly dangerous strategist who ever lived, and almost no one in your life is doing it. Don't try to control the manipulator's actions. Control their desires. Here's what most people get wrong about power. They think power is about force, about stopping people from doing things. But force is expensive. Force requires constant vigilance. Force creates resentment and resistance. Real power, the deep, invisible, almost supernatural kind, is when you make people want what you want them to want, and the cage feels like freedom, and the path you've chosen for them feels like their own idea. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who must constantly restrain his subjects is a prince who has already failed. A true prince arranges conditions so that his subjects choose what he would have chosen for them. Applied to dealing with manipulators, this principle becomes devastatingly effective because manipulators are, almost universally, driven by a small number of core desires: control, recognition, safety from exposure, the thrill of the game. And when you understand what someone wants, truly wants, at the level beneath their words, you can architect their behavior without ever directly opposing them. Consider what Octavian, later Augustus Caesar, did after Julius Caesar's assassination. Rome was a chaos of competing manipulators. Mark Antony was powerful, charming, and dangerous. He controlled the armies. He controlled the crowd. He controlled the narrative. Direct confrontation would have destroyed the young Octavian. Though instead, Octavian didn't try to stop Antony. He gave Antony exactly what Antony wanted most: the glory, speeches, the Eastern campaigns, the romantic grandeur of Cleopatra's Egypt. While Antony chased his desires across the Mediterranean, Octavian quietly built every institution that would actually last: loyal legions, Senate relationships, legal frameworks. He let Antony want his way into irrelevance. By the time Antony realized what had happened, it was over. He hadn't been stopped. He had been guided. This is your second rule. Map the desire, feed it selectively, redirect it quietly. When a manipulator is pursuing recognition, give them controlled doses of it, in contexts where their pursuit costs them credibility with the people who actually matter. When a manipulator wants control, let them have visible control over things that are strategically irrelevant, while the real decisions happen somewhere they cannot see. You are not fighting them. You are conducting them like an orchestra. They think they are playing their own music. The whole time, you've been holding the baton. Reversal 3. The borrowed hand. Rule number 3. Machiavelli called it using terze mani, third hands, indirect agents, people and circumstances that do your work while you stand at a comfortable distance. You could also call it the art of not being the one who acts. Here is a psychological truth that is so obvious it's almost embarrassing once you see it. When something bad happens to a manipulator, if they can trace it back to you, it creates a martyr. Suddenly, they are the victim. Suddenly, you are the aggressor. And every piece of social sympathy in the room pivots toward the person you were trying to stop. You become the story. They escape into it. History is full of leaders who understood this. Benjamin Franklin, yes, the kite and lightning Benjamin Franklin, was a masterful political operator who spent decades in the courts of Europe navigating sophisticated manipulators. He never directly attacked his enemies in writing. Instead, he cultivated what historians have called his network of consequence, people whose interests naturally aligned with the outcomes Franklin wanted, people who, when provoked by the manipulator's own behavior, would respond organically in ways that damaged the manipulator's standing. Franklin didn't pull strings. He watered certain seeds. The flowers grew on their own. This is the third rule, and it requires genuine patience, which is why most people never use it. You must identify who else the manipulator has wronged, is currently wronging, or will inevitably wrong. And you must ensure those people have what they need to act, not instructions, not a coalition, information, access. Occasionally, a question asked at exactly the right moment. There is a reason the most effective intelligence operations in history never work through direct action when indirect action is available. CIA has a term, cutout, for an intermediary that insulates the source of an operation from its consequences. You need cutouts, not for deception, but for protection. When the manipulator falls, and they will fall, because manipulators almost always eventually engineer their own downfall through overreach, you must be somewhere else. Holding a cup of coffee, looking mildly surprised, borrowed hand struck, and your hands are clean. Reversal 4. Make their weapon your weapon. Rule number 4. And this is the rule that will make you genuinely dangerous. Not dangerous in a harmful sense, dangerous in the sense that makes small predators suddenly recalibrate when they realize what they've wandered toward, turn their method against them, become fluent in the exact language they use to manipulate, and use it to speak truth. Manipulators rely on specific tools, flattery, false urgency, manufactured social proof, triangulation, using third parties to create jealousy or insecurity, guilt by implication, strategic ambiguity. These are not mysterious. They are learnable. And when you learn them, not to use harmfully, to recognize and reverse, something remarkable happens. A manipulator, who has spent years in a world where these tools reliably work, suddenly encounters someone on whom they do not work. That experience is, to a sophisticated manipulator, genuinely terrifying. Dr. Robert Hare, the criminologist who developed the PCLR, the standard diagnostic tool for psychopathy, noted something fascinating in his interviews with high-functioning manipulators. People they feared most were not the aggressive ones, not the loud ones. They feared the quiet ones who smiled and didn't react, because a person who doesn't react to flattery, who doesn't flinch at guilt, who doesn't scramble when false urgency is applied, is a person the manipulator's entire toolkit cannot penetrate. And a manipulator with a useless toolkit is like a surgeon without instruments. They simply cannot operate. Machiavelli, in chapter 18 of The Prince, draws the famous distinction between the lion and the fox. The lion uses force. The fox uses cunning. But what Machiavelli says next is rarely quoted. He says the truly effective prince must be both, and he must know when each is required. The lion frightens wolves. The fox avoids traps. But those who rely only on the lion do not understand what they are about. You must learn the fox's tricks, not to become a manipulator, but to make their tricks worthless in your presence. When they flatter you, note it, file it, and give nothing back. When they manufacture urgency, slow down, deliberately, visibly. When they triangulate, refuse to receive the message. Make them say it directly. Watch them squirm. When they use strategic ambiguity, ask for clarity, calmly, repeatedly, until the ambiguity collapses. Each of these micro-moves sends a signal the manipulator's nervous system understands perfectly, even if they never consciously process it. This one sees, and once they know you see, and that seeing you changes nothing in your composure, they will begin, slowly, unconsciously, to look for easier terrain. Reversal 5. Patience as predation. With rule number 5. This might be the most psychologically difficult of all 7, because it requires you to do nothing, visibly, while everything inside you wants to act. Cultivate patience not as a virtue, but as a predatory strategy. There is a hunting behavior observed in certain big cats, particularly leopards, that researchers find remarkable. Leopard, once it has identified its target, will wait, sometimes for hours, not moving, not adjusting, simply present. It does not rush when the prey is alert. It does not move when the moment is wrong. It waits until the exact configuration of factors, terrain, attention, timing, aligns in its favor, and then it moves once, with absolute precision. No wasted energy, No dramatic chase. One moment of perfect timing. That is how you operate around sophisticated manipulators. Machiavelli, writing to Francesco Guicciardini, one of his few genuine intellectual peers, once said something that sounds almost mystical until you understand it tactically. He wrote, in the original Italian, about occasione, the moment, the specific, unrepeatable window in which action produces maximum effect. He was obsessed with it, because he had seen, over and over, what happened when men of great capability acted before their moment arrived. They exhausted themselves. They alerted their enemies. They consumed the very resources they would need when the real window opened. He had seen what happened when lesser men, patient men, quiet men, waited, exactly as everyone around them was urging them not to, and acted at the precise right moment. They won, disproportionately, shockingly, with what appeared to onlookers as almost miraculous efficiency. It was not miraculous. It was timing. Your manipulator will overreach. They always do, because manipulation, at its core, is driven by anxiety, and anxious people accelerate. They push too hard. They grab too much. They make promises they cannot sustain, and claims that cannot withstand scrutiny. And when that moment comes, when the overreach is visible, and the contradiction is undeniable, and the mask slips in front of precisely the wrong audience, you must already be positioned, not scrambling to respond, already there. This is why patience is not passivity. Patience, practiced correctly, is the most aggressive strategic posture available. You are not waiting because you are afraid. You are waiting because you are ready. Reversal 6. Rewrite the story before they do. Rule number 6. Machiavelli was one of the first political thinkers to understand something that modern neuroscience has confirmed with disturbing precision. Humans do not respond to facts. They respond to narratives. It does not matter what actually happened. What matters is the story that gets told about what happened. Who tells it first? Who tells it most consistently? And whose version of events becomes the one that organizes other people's memories? This is not cynicism. This is cognitive science. Elizabeth Loftus spent decades at the University of Washington studying what she called the misinformation effect, the documented, replicated finding that human memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. And reconstructions are vulnerable to the stories we tell about them. What this means in the context of manipulators is profound. Manipulators are, almost always, excellent storytellers. It is frequently their primary skill. The reason they are effective is that they have developed an intuitive mastery of narrative, of framing, of sequencing, of emotional coloring. They will tell your story before you do. If you confront them, the story becomes, unstable person attacks me for no reason. If you expose them publicly, the story becomes bitter, vindictive person with an agenda. If you say nothing and disappear, the story becomes, I don't know what happened to them. Frankly, they seemed troubled. Every exit you can think of, they've already written the narrative for it, except one. The one where you become the author first, not by attacking, not by exposing, by subtly, consistently, over time, building relationships with the people who matter, sharing your perspective, not as complaint, but as observation, demonstrating your reliability so thoroughly that when the manipulator's narrative arrives, it lands in a room that is already furnished with a different story. Frederick the Great of Prussia, a ruler Machiavelli would have recognized with genuine respect, understood that controlling the court's perception of events was a full-time strategic operation. He didn't wait for his enemies to define him. He made sure the people who would be listening to those enemies already knew exactly who a pook Frederick was. The narrative arrived to find no vacancy. This is Rule 6. Build your reputation before it's needed as a defense. Establish your story before theirs can overwrite it. Not through aggression, through presence, through consistency, through being the person that people have already decided to believe. Reversal 7. Become unnecessary to them. Impossible to harm. Rule number 7, the final rule. the one that Machiavelli himself embodied, even when he failed to practice all the others perfectly in his own tumultuous life. The ultimate strategic position is to become someone a manipulator cannot afford to harm, not through threat, not through power over them, but through indispensability to the things they care about most. This is cold, this is calculating, and it works with a reliability that is almost inhuman. Manipulators, for all their complexity, are essentially self-interested. They damage people because those people represent no strategic cost to damage. They exploit people because the exploitation serves them. The moment that calculus reverses, the moment damaging you costs them more than protecting you, their behavior changes. Not because they have grown a conscience, because the math changed. Machiavelli's advice to the prince was never to make enemies of people you didn't 14 tends to make enemies of. Specifically, never harm someone unnecessarily, because an unnecessarily harmed person becomes a permanent enemy with nothing to lose. The inverse is equally true. The person the manipulator needs, for their reputation, for their network, for access to resources or opportunities they cannot replicate, is a person the manipulator will protect. Will they do it warmly? No. Will they do it sincerely? Probably not, but they will do it. And in the cold arithmetic of strategic positioning, functional protection is worth exactly as much as sincere protection, often more. Because functional protection doesn't evaporate when emotions change. So your final move, the culminating move in this 7-part game, is to engineer your own irreplaceability in the environments that matter. Become the connector others depend on. Become the person with knowledge they cannot find elsewhere. Become, quietly and without announcement, a load-bearing wall in whatever structure the manipulator is living inside. And then, you simply exist. They cannot move against you without the ceiling falling on themselves. Checkmate, without ever making a single aggressive move. Closing.